The town stirred before the sun had fully cleared the ridges. A pale light spilled across cracked boards, wagon wheels, and mud still slick with last night's rain. People gathered quickly, hungry for spectacle, restless as dogs waiting for meat. At the center of the square, a raised platform creaked under the weight of a man who wore greed like a second skin. His voice, sharp and scratchy from too much whiskey, rang out against the still air. Chained, trembling, and half collapsed beside him stood a girl no older than 17, her hair tangled, her lips pale, her body still aching from the cruel beginnings of her life. The crowd jeered, some whistled, others laughed, as though she were not flesh and blood but livestock. The auctioneer shouted numbers, each word slicing her like a blade. She swayed, clutching the splintered post beside her, the scent of sweat and dust mixing with the iron tang of her own blood. Her legs buckled, but her eyes burned steady. She scanned the crowd, faces blurred, mouths twisted with greed, but she would not let them see her broken. Each cheer that rose when a bid climbed higher was a reminder. They wanted her for what she could not give freely. A cheap laugh, a toy for cruelty, another body to toss into the pit of forgotten women. Somewhere within the haze of voices came a memory, not of warmth, but of absence. A mother she had never known, lost the moment she took her first breath. A father who vanished before she learned to speak. Hunger had been her companion, cold her blanket. When she was taken, dragged off by men who smelled of smoke and cheap rum, there had been no one to fight for her. Now, under the weight of so many eyes, she wished only that someone might see her as more than a price. The bidding grew sharp, violent in tone. A ranch boss with scarred hands and a laugh like broken glass lifted his chin. He was known, even to her ears, as the kind who crushed whatever he touched. Men shifted uncomfortably when he raised his hand, for his reputation carried darker stains than the mud beneath their boots. The auctioneer's grin widened, sensing easy money. Coins clinked, boots scraped, and with each cry of a higher bid, her body trembled harder. She forced her breath steady, whispering to herself, though no one could hear, "Not yet, not here." Then the air shifted. A silence, sharp and heavy, cut across the rowdy noise. From the far edge of the square, a lone figure emerged. Dust clung to his coat, his hat shadowed his face, but his gait carried a weight that silenced laughter. Spurs rang softly, each step deliberate, each sound louder than the drunken yells that came before. The girl lifted her eyes and met his, grey, cold, steady like a storm that had been waiting too long to break. He did not call out, did not play the game of raising bids in small amounts. Instead, he gave one number, higher than the rest, spoken low but certain, as if he had already claimed her. The crowd muttered in disbelief. Why waste hard money on a girl who looked closer to death than life? The ranch boss sneered, tried to raise the bid again, but the stranger's voice cut through once more, firm and final. Something in the tone carried more weight than gold. Even the auctioneer faltered, his smile dimming into unease. With a slam of the gavel, the deal was sealed. The girl's heart pounded in her ears, louder than the scattered protests, louder than the scrape of boots leaving the square. She braced herself as the stranger moved toward her, expecting rough hands, the same as every man before. But when he drew a knife, it was not to harm her. The blade flashed once in the dull morning light, and the ropes around her wrists fell free. She gasped, skin burning where the ties had cut deep. For a moment, she considered running, though her legs could barely hold her weight. Yet when he steadied her arm, his touch was not cruel, not possessive, only firm enough to keep her standing. She looked up, ready to spit defiance, to curse him before he could claim her. Instead, his voice came, quiet, meant only for her. "You're safe now." The words froze her tongue. Safe. A word she had never believed in, never held, never tasted. Her body trembled again, but not from fear alone. She searched his face, hunting for mockery, for hidden cruelty, for the inevitable mask to slip. All she found was a man carved by loss, carrying his own wounds, staring at her as though she were not an object, but a choice. The crowd dispersed, restless, unsatisfied by the ending of their show. The auctioneer packed his coins, grumbling curses under his breath. But she heard none of it. Her mind spun around those two words, clung to them as though they might shatter at any moment. Safe. Could it be true, or was this the cruelest trick yet? Her feet stumbled as he guided her from the stage, the square behind them dissolving into noise. Dust rose in small clouds with each dragging step, and the horizon stretched wide, empty, uncertain. Whatever awaited her beyond this moment, it was no longer in the hands of the men who had laughed at her pain. The stranger's grip was steady, his silence heavier than any vow. And so she followed, torn between fear and a fragile, dangerous hope, knowing only that the story had not ended here but had only begun. The journey to his ranch was long, the trail winding across plains baked dry by sun and silence. She rode weakly, her body swaying in the saddle as though each breath might unseat her. He kept his distance, speaking little, his eyes fixed ahead, as if the horizon held every answer he needed. When they reached the ranch, it was not the fortress of wealth she had feared but a place weathered by storms and solitude. Fences patched, barns leaning, the house quiet as if waiting for someone who had never returned. He lifted her down, not gently, not harshly, but with the same steady hand that had cut her ropes. She felt the weight of his silence more than any chains she had worn. Night swallowed the land quickly. She found herself inside the cabin, where shadows flickered against wooden walls. He poured whiskey on a strip of cloth and pressed it to the raw skin of her wrists. The sting pulled a sharp cry from her throat, but his face did not change. He was a man used to pain, his own or another's, and offered no apology. She flinched with every movement, half expecting him to reveal some hidden intent, yet he never did more than tend her wounds. "You'll live," he muttered, almost to himself, before setting the bottle aside. Sleep came reluctantly to her that night, broken by dreams of ropes, laughter, and the echo of the gavel. The days that followed carried both suspicion and quiet routine. She ate little at first, watching him from across the table, waiting for the trap to spring. He worked the land with an unyielding rhythm, breaking the earth, feeding the animals, speaking only when necessary. She helped when strength returned, clumsy with tools but stubborn in her refusal to remain idle. Slowly, the silence between them grew less sharp. Once, when she dropped a bucket and cursed under her breath, he allowed the corner of his mouth to lift in something like humor. She caught the fleeting moment, almost startled, and for a breath the fear that clung to her loosened. One evening, he sat by the fire and spoke without looking at her. His voice carried the weight of old ashes. "Had a wife once. And a little boy." The flames cracked, filling the pause. "Lost them in a raid. Sat in the smoke after, wondering why I was left standing." He said no more, but the silence afterward was no longer empty, it was heavy with confession. She understood enough. He had seen cruelty and chosen to bear it alone, until the day he cut her free. Trust came slowly, like water trickling into dry ground. She began to touch the earth without fear, planting seeds, brushing the horses, feeling life stir beneath her hands. He watched from a distance, not intruding, but she felt the weight of his gaze, a man learning not to lose, a girl learning not to run. Their bond was not spoken, but it deepened in gestures, a cup set by the door, a blanket draped quietly, a nod of acknowledgement when she finished a chore. The land itself seemed to shift with them, less barren, less hollow. But whispers travel faster than rivers in the west. Word spread to town that the girl was alive, living under his roof. Men spat her name in taverns, laughed about the rancher's foolishness, until one voice rose louder, the same ranch boss who had tried to claim her. He sent men riding under moonlight, shadows slipping along fences, horses restless with the scent of violence. She saw them first, dark figures watching from the ridge. Her blood chilled, but she did not run to hide. Instead, she told him, her voice steady though her hands trembled, "If I keep fleeing, I'll never stop. I won't let them own me again." The rancher studied her, the storm in his eyes reflecting her defiance. For a long breath, silence hung heavy, then he nodded. Together, they readied the ranch. Lanterns dimmed, rifles loaded, doors barred. The night stretched taut with waiting, every creak of wood, every rustle of wind sharpening the air. She stood beside him, no longer just the girl on the auction block but something harder, carved by pain into steel. Dawn broke in fire and dust. Hooves thundered across the ridge, shouts carried on the wind, and then the gunfire began. Shots cracked like lightning, smoke curling through the morning. He fired first, steady as the earth, dropping one man before the rest charged harder. Bullets split wood around them, glass shattered, horses screamed. She crouched, heart racing, until a bullet found his shoulder. He staggered but held the line, teeth clenched against the pain. Her gaze locked on the revolver lying inches from her hand, the world narrowing to a single choice. Her fingers closed around the weapon. The weight felt strange, but her resolve was iron. She rose from cover and fired, the kick jarring her arm, the sound ringing in her skull. One rider tumbled, the others cursed, momentarily thrown off balance. Her hand shook, but she fired again, each shot fueled by every jeer, every chain, every night of fear she had carried. The attackers faltered under the unexpected storm from the girl they had called weak. The rancher, blooded but unbroken, pushed forward with her, driving the last of them back across the ridge. The dust settled, the land falling into a silence more complete than before. Smoke curled from the barrel of the revolver in her hand. She lowered it slowly, chest heaving, eyes wide with the knowledge of what she had done. He leaned against the fence, blood seeping through his shirt, yet a faint smile crossed his face. "Told you," he said between breaths. "You're safe now." She dropped the gun, rushing to his side, tearing cloth into bandages, her hands trembling though her eyes did not waver. The fear had not left her, but it had changed shape. It was no longer the fear of being owned, but of losing the only person who had ever chosen to save her. She pressed the cloth to his wound, whispering words she had never dared to speak. "I won't run. Not anymore." The sun climbed higher, spilling light across the battered ranch. The air smelled of gunpowder and sweat, but beneath it was something new, a fragile beginning, a freedom born in fire. She looked out across the land, vast and untamed, and felt it stretch open before her. Not chains, not ropes. Possibility. A voice, low and steady, closed the silence as though speaking for both of them, and for whoever might hear. Sometimes salvation doesn't come from saints or angels. Sometimes it comes from broken people who refuse to break each other. The horizon glowed with promise. The story was not finished, it was only opening its next chapter, waiting for anyone willing to follow. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.